Hello, and a very good afternoon to you all, and good morning to those further west than I am here in the UK at the moment. We've got an amazing response to this webinar with people registering from all corners of the globe, right across Europe, France, Germany, Italy, and of course the UK, and also across Brazil, Colombia, India, and China, many other places too, and obviously in the US, where our speaker is coming from today. I am Roddy Miller, one of the founders of IEDP, and I'm delighted to be hosting this webinar today with John Davis of MIT. I'll introduce John in a few moments, but I'd like to give a couple more minutes for people to join us who've not quite managed to log on. I see the numbers are still going up. So while we wait, why can I ask people to let us know in the chat where you're listening in from? It's always good to see what the geographic variety is, and we'll take a note of that. I'd just like to say that IEDP has been going for just over 15 years, publishing information and reporting on the best in corporate learning. And our special focus on how large organizations work and use their research and executive programs. If you've not done so before, please do sign up on our website to receive our regular newsletters and invitations to other events, online events like this one. I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, John Davis. John this is his third time with us, and they've always been fantastic sessions we've had. I think that the theme of family business is one that is increasingly relevant outside of just the family business sector. I think there are lots of really interesting elements to family business interaction and things that family businesses have to particularly focus in on that is becoming more and more relevant to non-family businesses too. So that idea around the sort of society and stakeholders is very important now across the board, and John has a deep knowledge around this, so we're very lucky to have him. John leads the family enterprise programs at the MIT Sloan School of Management, where he teaches strategies for family enterprises to position themselves for the future. He's trained in management, psychology, and economics, and he advises multi-generational families from more than 70 countries around the world, and has delivered keynote speeches at the likes of the World Economic Forum. He is also chairman and founder of the Cambridge Institute for Family Enterprise. At MIT, he runs several family enterprise programs, and we'll get you the links to those later on once he's whetted your appetite further around that. Let's start the show.
Thank you, Roddy. Nice to be with you again in IEDP again, and hello to everybody. As Roddy said, I've always had one foot in academia and one foot in the advising world. I feel it both feed the other. My understanding of family enterprise broadly has really been nurtured by my being in the field, working in over 70 countries now with families that have businesses, typically upper middle size to enormous companies, and but interested in very similar things. How do you run them well, whatever we run, own them well, manage family relationships in this process, and really be able to build a foundation so that we can pass whatever we're doing, interested in, causes we believe in, into the future. It probably won't surprise any of the audience to say that historically, the younger generation, what's now called the next generation or rising generation, but the generation that's entering adulthood, entering careers, and starting to develop themselves either inside the family business or family office or family philanthropic foundation or outside, that the new ideas that change, shape, propel family enterprise have more come from next generation members than the senior generation members. And that doesn't mean in any way that the senior generation doesn't still have a focus on innovating, improving, and even changing direction. But more historically, and certainly today, of the pressure to change, the passion around new things, and new approaches to business that are kinder to our environment, kinder to society, contribute in various ways, that's largely coming from the next generation. So one could say that it's part of the job of a next generation. It's your job now, if you're in that next or rising generation, and given enough time, it'll be your next generation that is applying pressure to you. So historically, this has been a pattern. We're going to talk about the need to change and why change and how to change. And then at the very end, I'm going to talk about how do we think about this topic more broadly. Because family companies are not just what I study, it's where I study. It's a good model of organization that typically can be, a lot of what we learn in family companies can be applied more broadly in business. And I'll come back to that at the end. But first, we would very much like to know about you and why you're here. What is your interest in this topic? And so we've prepared a poll to ask you. We'll do this quickly so that we can get oriented to who you are and what your interest is. So what is your connection to this topic? So the professional advisors are in the lead. About a third of us are in that category. It's my category too. And interestingly, the senior and junior generation family members are exactly tied. And then we have some non-family interest in this topic also. So thank you for that. I think what we're about to talk about is broadly useful to every single one of these groups. Okay, so we can stop that. So the school, the Sloan School, where I teach now very happily, is doing wonderful things in terms of trying to understand the new era that we are very clearly into now, and even through its laboratories shaping the future by introducing new technologies of all kinds, but also has a strong commitment to adding to the world in a constructive way. I'm going to tell you at the end what some of the work that I'm doing, and a very interesting resource at MIT for you and your companies. But I'll wait for that. We're going to be talking about family companies. And these are companies that, without a question, the largest business sector in the world, but also any individual country, you'll find that family businesses really outnumber all other types of business. And there's anything from state-owned business to entrepreneurial businesses to brand new startups. There are lots of categories, but family ownership prevails as the largest sector. And so we think of family companies as the ones that are owned and ownership controlled by a single family, and where two or more family members influence the big directional ideas of the company. What we're going to do, what we invest in, the big hires we make, those are controlled ultimately by family. And we know from historical experience, the research on this topic started around the turn of this century. 2004, a very important study opened up a lot of academics, at least, to this understanding that I've had and my colleagues have had for a long time, that family companies are actually very strong performers. In fact, in many ways, they outperform, on average, non-family companies. We'll talk about that. At the same time, for the past 30 plus years that the field of family business has been in motion, evolving, we've also understood that family companies tend not to last much, many of them beyond the first or second generation. So first, we've got this interesting comparison. If you take non-family companies, they're good ones and bad ones, and compare those to family businesses, they're good ones and bad ones, high performers, low performers. On average, family companies perform better in terms of profitability, growth, returns of all kinds. And we explain, or researchers explain, and I've compiled our various explanations, that these are the reasons why we see better performance from family companies than non-family companies, because they're more likely to do these important things. They're more likely to be long-term. They're more stable financially in terms of ownership, in terms of key relationships. These are loyalty-based organizations, and they are have pronounced advantages in terms of innovation and operational excellence. They really care about these things, again, on average. And there's a family that contributes to the passion, the values, the persistence of these organizations. When you look across all the research and you think about the big items that reflect their better performance, these are they. At the same time, we know that family companies tend not to last very many generations. Now, they still last longer than non-family companies, but it's natural to ask the question, why is it that these superior performers tend not to last very long? Well, there are a lot of reasons why a company can be, and a family company can be, taken out of the game of business. These are the ones that I think are the most telling and the most influential. Obviously, weak management, weak ownership in various ways, but loss of family interest, family conflict, these can really work at a business, a family business, and undermine it. Unpredictable challenges come along occasionally, and in today's world, more and more frequently, that we just aren't prepared for. But the two that I've highlighted in red, I'm going to discuss a bit now, because both the increasing maturity, accelerating maturity of an industry. It used to be that an industry, steel industry, the car industry, the washing machine industry, the appliance industry, these industries all lasted a long time, and they tended to evolve slowly. So you could be a small or medium size or kind of large firm in these industries and still be at a scale. where you could compete well and pretty fairly. It's not the situation today. Industries mature, go from startup to growth to maturity, and then into decline much more quickly. And there's occasional disruption of industries where the bottom of the industry basically falls out and a new industry is continued, but not with all of the same players. In these conditions, family companies today need to learn how to migrate from what they're doing to what they need to do, and letting go of old activities and definitely old practices so that they can recreate value in new ways, because they're no longer able to compete well in the old stuff that they were doing. So these factors, industry maturity, timely migration, it's part of the formula. And family companies historically, a generation ago, 3 generations ago, several generations ago, they needed to change, they needed to innovate, they needed to do new things. But these changes tended not to happen so regularly and so forcefully as they do today. And this is a well-documented trend that's been going on for over 40 years by my count. The consolidation of industries within an industry, the rapid level of change in an industry, but it's true today. So you can't survive for long just based on being a strong innovator in your current business. You've got to be looking for new opportunities for growth and be able to migrate into those, meaning leaving some of the things you're doing now behind, because you have limited capital and limited attention span. So it's what I need you to focus on today. The other stuff stays important. Staying competitive, good customer relationships, innovations, operational excellence, all important. But the new thing on our radar screen has to be what's going on in industries and how fast we need to migrate. But it's hard. We're traditional. We're trained to be good operators, not good owners that think more strategically about our next bet. We tend, because we're operators, not to be externally focused enough, and families, because of loyalty and other reasons, tend not to divest or get out of things very quickly, and certainly not, in my view, not quickly enough. Now, a company that did it has lived to tell the story and has been a great proponent of what I'm talking about here, is the Cox Enterprises, which is mostly really a media company, but they're also in communications, and they have a particular focus on the auto industry that has proved very valuable for them. And this company has started in newspapers and gradually went to other forms of media. But as Alex Taylor, the current 4th generation family CEO of this family company based in Atlanta, Georgia, has said, look, 15 years ago, this quote is now a few years old, but 15 years ago, we were 80% a newspaper company. And essentially, if we had stayed a newspaper company, we would be out of business today. But they didn't stay in newspapers, even though they loved and still love newspapers. They divested, diversified, and migrated into some new activities. And because of that, they've grown hugely. But it all relied on their ability to see what was up in the newspaper business. They've got the same radar going now in every one of their companies, and they're able to move quickly, decisively into new things. It was emotionally painful for them, but they did it, and they're better off. They're survivors and prosperous survivors because they have. So how much, here's another poll for you. If you're a member of a business family only, please, no advisors, no other people. But if you're a part of a business family, which one of these 4 categories would you check? In our system, we are very open to new ideas, not much resistance, or we have some openness to new ideas and new things where people are talking about, or the mirror of that, we have some or much resistance to new ideas. Which would you say? And you know, these proportions here are what I'm seeing in the broad family business population that I follow. That
okay, I'm going to end it there.
Yeah, there are some family companies that are really pretty open, that promote, that encourage, that even insist on what's the next big idea that we need to be thinking about, the next big market, what do we need to do next? And but that's about half. And then the other half are slow, not completely closed, but slow in change. And that has to change, pardon the pun. So why? Well, in part, and it's only in part, but this is an increasingly important part. It's because the 2 generations aren't aligned around the need to change. Now, recognizing it's next generations are always, by definition, less invested in what we've been doing than the senior generations typically that have been doing it for years. So there tends to be a powerful senior and a less powerful junior generation split on the importance of changing. And we recognize that the senior generation has some understandable reasons why they are slower at recognizing the need to change and moving to change. And their sense of urgency about the need to change is simply different. It's not just a little slower, it's different than we see in the next generation. So given this factor, why do we need to change so much? Well, because starting in 2000, right about there, give or take a few years, depending on which expert you're listening to, there was a change in the way we did things. Technology changed in numerous ways, mostly around automation. And in 2017, I didn't catch it, but maybe you did, there was an additional step where the automation process became more or less intelligent automation, where controls could be computer monitored, and the automated processes and computerized thinking and algorithms could learn and change and direct what things needed to adjust and not require much in the way of human intervention. So we've been on this path, along with others, for a while, and it leads to these kinds of conditions, which I think we all can recognize in various ways in our business, in our personal and family lives, and also in society. that the world is far more interconnected. There's many more choices today, that you can order almost anything online and have it delivered to your house, with some changes or slowness now because everything seems to be backed up. But that didn't exist even 10 years ago. Increasingly, every organization, even families, are more diverse now in important ways. Age, location, gender roles, the kinds of lives and lifestyles family members are leading now, their views on everything from politics to religion to the responsibilities of business. It's different, and it's becoming more diverse. And the pace of life, work, and decision-making has rapidly accelerated. You can't be a slow decision maker anymore and feel comfortable that you can remain competitive. The type of change that we're seeing is different. The future is less predictable, and the world looks different year over year over year. Things that we're used to, the way banking works, it's changing. It's not the way it was. The way governments work, changing too. The way we sell things or make things, it's changing. And so the terrain looks different, and it's shaping these factors well beyond technology, but including the environment, globalization, and all these social, economic, political factors. The world is just changing, and it's reshaping society. It's definitely impacting and reshaping families in some important ways, and also businesses. We could spend a day talking about the particulars of all of these changes, but the point here is to make the point that the world is changing and you need to as well. So, new poll, Roddy. What
Yep.
are some signs? What are some signs, and everybody participate, please. What are some signs in family companies or companies that you notice and you see as a reason why we have to change? As many as you want to choose here. Looks like all of these are important, especially the industry change. We may be losing some people, some good people, going to better opportunities. Our next generation seems to be not on board with what we're doing. So for all of end, we're taking a hit financially in some way. Any and all of these can be wake-up calls. And we need to wake up and really take change as a given and ask ourselves, not do we need to change, but how do we need to change? And how can we get it done? And try to do it in a way so that you're not behind the curve. And then the question is, if next generations are pressing for a lot of change or important needed changes in various ways, it could be the social impact of your company or family, or it could be the need to innovate, or the need to diversify into some new lines that seem more in line with where consumers are headed. But they tend not to have the influence, the power, and in many cases, the visible credibility that the senior generation looks for to invite you into conversations about change. How do you do it? How do you work with the senior generation? Recognizing at least you recognize, and I want the senior generation to recognize this too, you have a lot of strengths, next gen. You're not as attached to what we were doing and want, this is hardwired, I think, into generations, the desire to do at least some things differently, to innovate, to change the way we're doing things, and even what we do. You have typically more advanced education, more understanding and comfort, certainly, with technology, which is facilitating and demanding change. You're young and you identify with other young people working in the company. You get them in some ways much better. And you're more international. Each generation, starting with mine, I'm a boomer, has become more international. Millennials now are even much more international than Generation X members. But you've got typically less experience in business analysis. You don't have as much, you may have some, but don't have as much ownership power. And as seen through the lenses of a senior generation that's been doing this or in charge of things for a long time, you don't know as much. And you're not as credible when you come to us with the need to change. So the question is, how do you get influence, power, build credibility with the seniors? And we've been studying this. We've been working in families now for over 30 years. And this is a perennial issue of the next generation. We want to introduce change. We want to see our family and our business and our investments doing different things. We think it's the right thing to do. But how do we convince them? Because they still make the decisions ultimately. Well, getting ownership, even small pieces of ownership in a family business, raises the next generation into a new category. Now they're senior and junior owners as well, but it matters. Roles inside the family enterprise system could be in a member of the family council. You could be a board member in a subsidiary company, not the big board. You could ask to join a committee of some kind, management may be doing it, or the owners might want this done, looking at some new trend and innovation. But the idea is to engage, get involved, get invited into certain roles, and then do some hard work and show them that you're smart, creative, happy to work on a team, influential, contributing. They need to see you in action. And the sooner you start doing that, and the sooner you start making visible contributions that people outside the family even say, that was really important, that was good, she's great. That helps in building credibility and influence. If you're not working in the business, successfully managing your career, getting noticed and advancing in what you're doing. Demonstrating to them that, look, I want to contribute, but I don't have to. I'm not depending on the family company. I could do this. That point, made in a polite way, can be very helpful so that they don't think you just want to get in for self-benefit. And then finally, who you know and who you work with and who you associate with outside the family and family enterprise can also give you credibility and help you build the experience you need to participate. If you're interested in exploring this topic more, I have written a piece on assessing and building your power in these systems. And it's available at Harvard Business Publishing. So you can advocate, and advocating around small, simple changes for obvious reasons tends to be easier. If it's a low stake change in the family business system that doesn't require a lot of resources, a lot of top management time, doesn't carry much in the way of risk. And we see that today. These kinds of changes are, look, in our foundation or our social impact work as a family or company. Why don't we try this? I'll join the committee. I'll work like hell to get this done. But why don't we try to help elementary schools? Or why don't we try to help immigrants? Or why don't we try to help something? It's not a big change. It's a doable change. Why don't we try doing this? And let's experiment and see if we can do it well and the benefits that that has for others and ourselves. And then there's more fundamental change. We really need to get out of, poisoning the environment in various ways and into new products, new businesses that are at least close to carbon neutral. Can't we do that? Well, yeah, but how do we do that and not disrupt our family and company financially? To be influential in these kinds of decisions, it helps if you've worked your way into roles that can give you a voice. But you also have to recognize these are not simple changes. And if you voice, look, I understand there's some risks here. I understand that this could be really disruptive to our employees. I really understand that this can also be, this is not going to happen overnight. I get it. If you tell the senior generation that you're not just wide-eyed and idealistic, but you're strategic and you have ideas and want to work at it with them, much better chance that you can do something. And in the several situations that I've seen where younger generations have made a strong impact in shifting the direction of the family company in ways that they think are more interesting and viable. This has always been the process. Work your way into the system. Admit that there are risks in doing big changes, but why can't we experiment a little here? And beyond some other recommendations, then we're going to close and we're going to talk. Making sure you set your own expectations and you communicate your own expectations about the ability to change quickly or not. You've got to get invited to sit with them, talk with them, express your ideas, offer to look into things, not just say we have to do this. You have to get invited into important conversations. Now, you probably won't be invited to the board to present your idea, but maybe. But you might be able to start some of your ideas in the family council or by having an informal meeting with some of the owners. And in these meetings, it's not just telling the others what you think we need to do, but asking a lot of questions, showing curiosity. And whatever you do, don't try to embarrass them by arguing that they're out of touch or that they have inferior values. Whenever I hear a next generation going to the senior generation and saying, I think we should talk about our values. We've written these out. Why don't we talk about them? The implicit message being sent to the senior generation is, our values are better than yours. So it's much better to talk about changes that the world seems to be insisting on, and how can we address these kinds of issues while managing the risk of doing it. And that involves being sensitive to what they fear. And you may not understand that unless you talk with them, show curiosity, and probe on what could go wrong if we do this. Use data whenever you can. And maybe the most important thing on the list, they're all important. Don't go as an individual or a pair to the senior generation saying, we got to do this or that. Build alignment within your generation on what we need to do. And make sure as much as you can that you're a solid group. If you become well-aligned, well-focused as a generation, your collective influence will matter more than any of your individual influences do. So it's fair to say in a broad way and an ongoing way that if you're a next generation member that wants to influence in a constructive, positive way, the job is to become junior partners to the senior generation. There'll always be, between parents and next gens, kind of a senior junior feel until the day comes when it goes like this. So, but partnering with them by asking for opportunities to work together, getting into roles and delivering, talking, listening, and sharing credit with them for advances that you make. Being able to hear a lot of different viewpoints and make progress around building consensus. And then, you know, you've got to be public as well as private about these things. And you want to show them, even if we disagree internally about this, we're on the team. And we're not going to publicly say things that put pressure on you. Some families do this and it's regrettable. I'm done with my comments, and then maybe later I can tell you a little bit about what's going on at MIT. Roddy, can I come back to you for
absolutely? Yeah, no, let me put
dialogue?
my camera on. There we go. Excellent. Thank you very much, John. As ever, packed full of data and perspectives and thinking. And let's see if we can. I've got a few questions I want to put to you, and I see some coming through too. So in the time remaining to us, let's see how much of that we can get through. But one of the sort of overriding thoughts that you created with me is, of course, in family businesses, the older generation is likely to hang on in power and influence for much, much longer than in public businesses. I don't know what the average CEO of a Fortune 500 company is, what, 6 or 7 years or something like that. And I suspect, and less even, okay. And but in a family business, you could be there for decades. And so you've got people who are relatively old or even genuinely old in their 70s, 80s, who are still with their hand firmly on the tiller. And that must change.
And they're living longer, healthier.
And living longer, healthier. So that must change that dynamic. Standing here in the UK, we are headed by a family business. They call themselves the firm, after all, the royal family. And you look at the prospective CEO who's been waiting for 70 years to get his hand on the tiller. It's a sort of metaphor for how this works.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's that's not getting, that problem is not getting better, it's getting harder. You know, it used to be a generation, 2 generations ago, let's say, the senior generation would conveniently die younger, 60s. And the junior generation then was in their 30s, and it was a more natural transition. Still lots of stories about, you know, founders and others living till their 80s and not relinquishing almost any decision-making power. But in general, it was easier. And now we've complicated things because we live longer. And if I live longer and I'm vital and I want to stay in the game because I love this game, what do I do? How do I still contribute while delegating and partnering with others to help make some big decisions? How do I do that? Well, if you understand that this is a life issue, not just an organizational issue, for the senior people, you can understand how it's important to build your relationship with key individuals in that generation to show that you buy in terms of values. You are really interested in helping promote the family's future success and the family. Yeah. And be asked to be invited. And when you're invited, ask more questions than you make statements at first. And show them that you're curious, that you're open-minded, that you want to learn from them, not just that you want to express new ideas. The relationship building part of this change dynamic is fundamental. It's fundamental. And the more generations become opposed and have friction about direction, culture, practices, the more the next generation can feel shut out, yeah, and then they'll go away.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, a family business is clearly, the relationship is a blood one, is a blood tie because it's family. But what we're saying here, in fact, is there's a lot of politics in it too, in ensuring that you have a position of influence and strength in shaping what's to come. Yeah. Fantastic. And my other reflection was that, you know, it takes a lot more bravery, I suspect, and you touched on the emotional element in what you were talking about, that emotional ability to make a change and to change direction, and it takes a degree of bravery and intelligence in order to make the right decision to head in a different direction. But and that applies from both sides, the junior generation as well as the senior generation. The senior generation presumably has to be able to remove their hand from the tiller or lighten their grasp a bit too.
Yes. And, you know, some leaders, especially in later generations, have an easier time doing that than especially founders who just adore being in the center of most everything and believe that I'm indispensable. And later generation leaders have less of that. They might still have some of it, but less of it, and are more open if you demonstrate capability, insight, and real commitment to our mission. Come on in, let's talk. So the relationship building, the showing respect, the asking to participate and contribute, demonstrating your commitment and your capabilities, and then building your generational alignment so that they say, wow, the next generation feels strongly about this. Well, okay, then we should talk about it.
Great. Thank you. We got some good questions coming in. There's one here from Jean-Claude. He says, do you see a change with a greater separation of roles between the various elements of the family, between the owners, executive boards, management?
Well, I do. I think that most families, and even most families historically, most family members were owners and not very active owners at that. Typically only the people in the business or the few that were on the board really made decisions and others were informed. Today we see a lot more transparency, desire to be quickly informed, but also collaborate, listen to my opinion about things, so that the role of owners is changing, especially in larger systems. I see it. And family members are taking, fewer and fewer family members are going into traditional businesses in management roles, especially if the companies have grown up quite a bit. So the ability to influence through management is noticeably less. But if the owners and the board have strong roles, you can still make the directional, influence the direction of the company. So yeah, these roles are changing, Jean-Claude. And families need to adjust to these changes.
There's a question here from Francesco, who asks if you could just explore a little bit more about the role of the management team in family companies, which he thinks is definitively different to that of public companies. What role might or should the management team have supporting the change agents?
It's critical. It's always critical that you get, even if the owners or board initiate a change. We should be in here and out of here. We need to grow in these ways. We need to change our practices. Even if that comes down, the management team, nothing or very little will happen if you don't have basically the compliance and hopefully the enthusiastic endorsement of these changes by your senior managers. And families don't change their senior management team, family or non-family, very often. In inflection points, generational transitions, but also changes in the way we need to do things, then we'll do it. But you need your senior managers. And again, this goes back to the idea of partnering. To the extent that the owners partner with the board, to the extent that the board partners with senior management, you talk about the issues together, you try to problem solve issues somewhat together, and then but there is a hierarchy of control and power, and we respect that, but we try to bring people on board early around the need to change. One metaphor that I think helps me, I think helps everybody, is that when an organization gets even medium sized, it becomes a boat, a large boat that doesn't turn quickly. And because of our loyalties, because of our long-term planning and commitments, that can be great in a lot of ways, but it can slow down dramatically the turning of the boat. And if it takes a long time to get the boat turned, you've got to start earlier in the process to start influencing, building understandings, getting people to collaborate around where we could go to get the boat pointed in a different direction. So early, we have to become earlier in our conversations about various forces and the need to change, because it's going to take us a while and we don't have a lot of time. So you got to start earlier.
We don't have a lot of time here either in the webinar, but I want to squeeze in a couple more questions. And you've just touched on two, in fact, which I'm going to try and merge, and they follow on very nicely from what you've just asked. One from Michael, which says, what have you seen work well as the size of the family grows to continue the success of the business? And you sort of were on that theme just then. And similarly from Anne, who says that they've essentially got a new family business. And how do we learn more about setting up the family business and establishing key infrastructure? So I think that bit about how you structure it to enable this to happen.
Yeah, and as an empiricist and pragmatist, I really like doing small steps first and then bigger steps later when we become more comfortable. And the way you set up, it's important in every family company to decide who makes what decisions and who discusses what topics. Just because we talk about something in our family council or at the owner's level doesn't mean that we make the decision. Maybe it's a board decision, maybe it's a management decision, but you need to sit down and rethink that. And that will take a year of talking, changing, allocating decisions, how does it go, et cetera. What coordination do we need between the family and the board? Things like that. And so I hope I'm being responsive to these good questions. But sitting down as a group, and first the key owners with maybe some other family members that are really attuned to the family need to be thinking about the architecture of your system. And it could be simple, it could be more complicated. This is an area where it's pretty situational too. And where I would want to say to the two participants who asked these good questions, give me a call and tell me what your situation is. And then I can give you more precise advice. But you do need to figure out how you're going to decide.
I've got one last closing question that I'd like to do to put to you before, because we are slightly over time. But you have got that other slide there, John, that I think that has the programs on, and is your contact details, are they there? Or
yeah. Right down here in the
okay, yeah.
And thank you, Roddy. And you know, we're doing a lot at MIT to help families at different stages and in different ways really learn how to take the next steps.
Well, I've got one last closing question from Jim. You're okay
Thank you.
He said, should we be creating bigger families with increased employee participation? So it sort of slightly broadens out the topic. You know, should we increase or expand our view of what a family business is?
Well, it's an interesting strategy because birth rates in most countries around the world are going down. And but because of divorce, remarriage, partnering with people that have existing families, the complexity of families is going up. And whether you decide to organically grow your family or through acquisition, I joke,
yeah.
You know, having a good-sized family is useful if it's increasing your talent pool and doesn't fracture the family, the unity of the family. But you got to work at those things.
Yep.
So a bigger family can be very useful if you're really devoted to unity and building good talent.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. We are unfortunately out of time. Those hours always go very fast. it's been hugely enjoyable and hugely informative. So thank you once again, John. Yeah, as up on the screen now, the details on how to find out more and get in touch on this program, but also with John through MIT. So all it remains for me to do is to thank you very much indeed, John, for being with us today, and thank everybody for joining us. We are in fact back on Tuesday with a look at the great training robbery. So do you get as much out of training as it says you do? And there will be a lively debate on Tuesday hosted by ourselves and at Cranfield University. So sign up for that if you haven't already. But John Davis, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody.